Today's ancient word is from the first chapter of Mark, verses 9 through 15. About that time, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee, and John baptized him in the Jordan River. While he was coming up out of the water, Jesus saw heaven splitting open, and the Spirit, like a dove, coming down on him. And there was a voice from heaven, "You are my Son, whom I dearly love. In you I find happiness." At once the Spirit forced Jesus out into the wilderness. He was in the wilderness for 40 days, tempted by Satan. He was among the wild animals, and the angels took care of him. After John was arrested, Jesus came into Galilee, announcing God's good news, saying, "Now is the time. Here comes God's kingdom. Change your hearts and lives and trust this good news."
So welcome to this season of Lent. Lent has traditionally been a very somber season, a season where we have talked a lot about giving things up, things that we're particularly fond of, like chocolate or ice cream or whatever your passion is. But when this season began, which really is pretty, it's unclear exactly when it began, sometime in the 4th century, the point was more about drawing closer to God than self-deprivation. There are 40 days in Lent. Those 40 days are assumed to align with, 40 is an important number in the Bible. 40 days is what we say Jesus was in the wilderness. Our Old Testament lesson today talks about Noah, and if you remember the story of Noah, it rained for 40 days and nights. The Israelites were in the wilderness for 40 years. So there's something significant about 40, although scholars really believe it was just a number that was meant to represent a long time. 40 was a long time. But these 40 days this year, we're trying to use that, instead of looking at how can we deprive ourselves, how can we draw closer to God? And maybe that does mean giving up some of the things that get in our way of our relationship with God. This first Sunday of Lent is traditionally about the temptation of Jesus. But this year we're in Mark, and Mark's version of the temptation is only 2 verses. It just says it happened. It happened. Jesus went in the wilderness. Actually, it says the Spirit took him to the wilderness. He was tempted. The angels took care of him, and he came out. The point, but in Mark's gospel, and those who chose the lectionary started it with the baptism. Have him move through that and then immediately go in to the work of ministry. Jesus keeps moving. Jesus is about not staying in any one place, but getting to the work of ministry with the people. And I think that's important to us. I think there's a message in there for us, that we are to be about getting to the work of ministry with people, with others. We are living through a time where there is plenty of heartache and pain, violence, grief, and more than any other time, although I'm sure I'm not the first person to say that, I'm sure that's been said many times over the years, it seems this is a time when others who don't know this message, who don't know about the love and forgiveness of God, need to hear about it. There aren't a lot of happily ever after stories out there. some type of pain or grief or violence, accidents, illness, death seems to touch all of us. None of us are immune from that. But how we get through it, what happens in that, can be very different based on what we believe and what we know of God and what we think God's role in this is. That's the good news. The good news for us is that at our baptisms, we too were touched by God. The Spirit was on us, and we were named beloved and forgiven. Yes, we're to look at our lives and constantly reevaluate what we're doing to make sure we're in line with God. But ultimately, we have that assurance of God's forgiveness. So it's our privilege to share that in whatever capacity we are able to do, in whatever ministry you have. And a lot of us, that notion of ministry has gotten sort of skewed to just be this role that I play. But I am not the only minister in the congregation. We are all ministers. In fact, we believe in the priesthood of all believers. So how do you minister in your context with the people that you interact with? How are you about sharing peace and love and forgiveness? There's not a lot of forgiveness in this world anymore. You're either right or you're wrong. You're either a good person or you're a bad person, and we're going to penalize you to the nth degree of the law. That whole zero tolerance policy that we've picked up on every issue. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean letting people off the hook, but it does mean that we don't become eternally damned for a mistake that's made. So how do we live that out? I was recently in a conversation with some colleagues, and someone made the comment to me that the young people, the young adults that she has run into, it was a female colleague, are without hope. And that has not been my experience. We've had several young adults come through our house as friends of our children, and yes, I hear them say they've made mistakes, but they still have hopes, they still have dreams, they still are carrying on. What they need is someone to believe in them, to listen to them, to validate who they are and what journey they're on, to say that they have value as a person. That's an incredibly important message. I think that's a message that we've been trying to impart with our children and our youth. That they have value, they have something to say, and we want to hear them. That's a huge step for us. But I want you to think in your lives and in the circles of people that you encounter, whether it's at the grocery store or the mall or where you shop or where you do anything else you do, the hair salon, then getting your nails done, wherever. As you encounter these people, we are to be about sharing love, peace, and hope. helping them experience that in us. I read the paper yesterday, and it was so sad to read. The one article was about that Eric Nausch, I'm going to pronounce it Nausch, from Las Vegas, who felt that he was being bullied, so he went out and killed the woman and her 22-year-old son. And then there's the whole Monica Miller and Randy Schreiner thing. We have to help people see that there's other ways to deal other than reacting to violence. The violence seems to keep escalating. And the only way we can counter that is by being a non-anxious presence, bringing out the love and the hope and the forgiveness. Not that we forget what they do, but does a 19-year-old need to go on death row? I'm not sure about that. Things to think about, ways to live. Now is the time. Our world, our congregation, our community, our world needs us to be a positive force, to be about God's kingdom, to live as God's kingdom people, to align ourselves with God and God's purpose, and to trust the good news that we are forgiven and so are others, and to share that message with everyone we meet. May it be so. Amen.